Alright, this lesson here is pretty much going to lead to an assessment at the end that you need to make sure you're ready for. It's designed to bring some of that material that we've covered this semester back to your memory. After this video is finished, you will take a quiz on MathXL, but you need to make sure that you watch the video first. You will be allowed to use your notes, but you are going to have to work alone, so again, be sure to prepare. Be sure to listen to what's going on, and then after that you'll be able to do what you need to do in terms of the assignment. One of the topics we talked about this semester was about slope, and there were 3 ways to find slope that we learned about. We learned about one including using the word rise over run to find the slope of an actual line. We had another one where we identified the value of m in a slope-intercept formula. And the most difficult value was the most difficult way was pretty much using the table to find the value. So we're going to look at all 3 of those before we move on to another topic. So in the questions we saw, we were asked to find the slope of a line for the problem, and in some of the questions they gave us 2 dots. And so when we looked at this, we were able to look at this dot here, which was set for us, this dot here, which was set for us, and we were taught to use rise over run. And when we did rise over run, we were supposed to start from the left dot and count how many times we go up or down, which of course is down 1, so it would be a -1. And we always ran to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so -1/5 was our slope. I also showed you, if necessary, to make a rectangle out of the 2 dots, and you can see that there is one box going up and down, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes going right. Whatever it was, we just needed to make sure we knew how to identify the up and down direction, and then the left-right direction, or should I say the right direction, because we always run to the right. So again, make sure you're aware of that before we do what's necessary. The second question here, again, looking at the 2 dots that they give us, we are always trained to start from the leftmost point. Again, count our way up, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which means that our slope for that line was 5/6. Alright. The thing about it is that some of the questions we're going to see, they don't give us 2 points, they actually just give us a line, and they want us to be able to find the slope in general. And whenever that happens, we have to identify the points on our own. Just make sure to pick what we call perfect points. And again, by perfect points, I mean points like this that really are not in the, like, I guess I can draw a bigger picture because it's not really there. If the line is going through here, this actually would be what I would consider my perfect point, but these are not, because it does not cross at a clean location. So when you go to look at your line, make sure it's crossing at a clean location. For example, it's usually, the first point is usually going to be on the y-axis, and then you just kind of look, that's not perfect, that's not perfect, no, 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 yes here. And once you've created your 2 dots, you now can do the rise over run game, which is to go down 1, 2, 3, which makes it a -3, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4, which gives us a slope of -3/4. Alright. Same thing over here. Again, typically your first good point is going to be where it crosses the y-axis. They're usually pretty nice about that. And then we gotta look for another nice point. No here, no there, no, no, and then we got one here that looks to be clean. And so again, starting from the left point, we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is a +5. We go over 1, 2, which is a +2, and our slope for that line would be 5/2. Again, that was something that we learned, I think it was in chapter 5, that we talked about slope, but you want to start bringing that back to your memory. Again, these are major topics that you need to keep in mind, especially for the 150-point test that you're going to be taking pretty soon. Another question asked us to find the slope of an equation. This was actually pretty easy. You just had to remember that the slope-intercept formula was y = mx plus b, where m is slope and b is the y-intercept, or as we said, the slope is attached to x whenever y is alone, and so that's what we use whenever we graphed our lines, and it worked out that way. So in this question, we see that y is alone, we see that 3 is attached to x. The slope was easily enough just 3, or the rate of change is also what they called, was the rate of change, but the slope or the rate of change in that question is 3. On B, what they do is they move the numbers around, and so even though you want to say negative 8 is a slope, notice that negative 8 is not attached to an x, and so what we're looking at is that 2 would be the slope because 2 is actually attached to that x. Alright. On C, looking at this, you have 6 and a negative x. Of course, this is where the slope is, but there's no number. Keep in mind, whenever there's no number, that number is a 1. So the slope on that equation would be negative 1. Alright, so those two types of slope questions were pretty easy. It was the third type that challenged us the most, and it really wasn't as much of a challenge. It was just more of whether or not we practiced the skill enough to remember what we're supposed to do. So this process wasn't very difficult to do, again, once we learn how to put the points into a table form and follow the pattern. The pattern itself was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You might want to write that down for yourself so that you have it to kind of go through for your notes whenever you get to that Math Excel stuff. And in terms of what all that stuff meant, y2 meant it was the second y, so the 2 meant for the second y. y1 represented the first y, so again that's the first y. x2 was meant for the second x, and x1 represented the first x. So again, it wasn't so hard to use. The thing was, it was a lot easier to do whenever we put them into a table. And if you remember, what I taught you to do is to take this table, put down x and y, make your chart. And then I said you simply take each point and slide it into the table. So 4, 9 was my first point, and 2, 1 was my second point. Again, these are my x's, these are my y's, and when I go to do y2 minus y1, the thing was we always start here and we do that one minus that one, so it was 1 minus 9 on the top, and then we start on the bottom on our second x and did this minus that, which was 2 minus 4 on the bottom. Working that out using your calculator if necessary, we end up with 1 minus 9, which is negative 8 on top, 2 minus 4, which I believe is negative 2, and then negative 8 divided by negative 2 is a positive 4, so the slope or the rate of change on that set of points is 4. So again, we are going to need that, especially once we start our review, because there is a process where we had to find a slope. I'm just not going to talk about it in this video, but there was a process where we had to find a slope, and that is one of the things that you want to make sure you are solid on. Looking at the second one real quick, again, make your XY table. Negative 3, 4 again was our first point, so we just brought it down. Negative 8, negative 6 was our second point, so we brought it down also. And again, it's y2 minus y1, so this is my second y minus my first y, again always starting on the bottom right corner, and we end up with negative 6 minus 4 on top. The trick here was when we go to subtract this, you get negative 8 minus a negative 3, and we had to be careful that whenever there was a negative in our second number that we actually put the double negative there. You could check your calculator for this, but what you're doing when you do negative 6 minus 4 is you actually end up with negative 10. And here, whenever you have the double negative, again, you could type in negative 8 minus negative 3 as you see it and get the answer there. Or, as I said, you can do the double switch, and if you know your numbers here, the negatives, negative 8 makes plus 3 is negative 5, which of course when you divide that is a slope of positive 2. Alright, so again, what I'm trying to bring back is just some of the patterns and habits that we did so that you can have it in your head whenever we need it. Don't worry about rushing through this video. The quiz is not going to hurt you as much as what you think. It is more important that you get the information down, so just make sure you're watching this thing all the way through. Other than that, looking at this one, the only thing that makes it somewhat difficult is the fact that there are decimals, but I really don't think that the decimals make it that difficult. Again, you put your X and Y chart, you bring down the first point, negative 3.5 and 9.2. You bring down your second point, negative 1.5 and 1.2. And you do the same pattern we've been doing, which is y2 minus y1, which means take this minus this, which is 1.2 minus 9.2 over this minus that, which is negative 1.5 minus, again, parentheses, negative 3.5. Switching that over to be a double positive, and doing the work that we need to do. Again, these are decimals, but we have a calculator that should make the decimals easier to work with. And so we do 1.2 minus 9.2, which is negative 8. And then we do negative 1.5 minus negative 3.5, which is 2. And in the end, negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So again, what we're looking at there, just make the table, do your y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1, everything should be good. Alright. A second topic, which is why this is in all caps, we talked about pattern recognition. Again, we're not going to get all the way into this stuff. We are going to review for the final over the next few weeks, and these things are going to come back, but I'm just trying to get some of the key ideas back in your head before we start doing that. But again, another major topic was based on our ability to recognize and create a function for a pattern of numbers. What we learned to do was to look at the difference between the numbers until we found a common difference. So looking at these examples real quick just to bring it back, remember that the x's weren't important, just the fact that it was going 0, 1, 2, 3. But what we were supposed to do was look at the fact that from 2 to 5 is adding 3. From 5 to 8 is adding 3. From 8 to 11 is adding 3. And what we learned was that this had a common difference of 3. Alright, so once you had that same number, it meant that you could stop, and that was it. If you look at question B or equation B, again, notice that 1, 2, 3, and 4 go in order. And so we look at 3 to 6, which is adding 3. We look at 6 to 11, which is adding 5. We look at 11 to 18, which is adding 7. This is not a common difference yet, and what we learned was to go do this again to where we said from 3 to 5 is adding 2. From 5 to 7 is also adding 2, and that would represent our common difference there, whereas the first check represented a common difference on the first one. And again, the third one that we saw looked kind of like this one, to where we looked from 1 to 2 and recognized it added 1. This added 7. If you don't know what it is, just take the second number minus the first, so 28 minus 9, which is 19. And then 65 minus 28, which is 37. Of course, that's not a common difference, so we have to keep going. So we look at this. From 1 to 7 is plus 6. From 7 to 19 is plus 12. I don't know 37 to 19, so I do 37 minus 19 to find out that that is plus 18. And again, still not a common difference, but what we were taught to do is to check it 3 times just to see. From 6 to 12 is plus 6. From 12 to 18 is plus 6. We have our common difference, and it took us 3 times to get there. So again, what we learned when we were doing that was that if that happens, that we are supposed to use that, how many times it went, to check for, or to base it off of the pattern. What we learned was that if it took 1 attempt to create a common difference, and the pattern was based in a regular x. So what we learned in this, whenever we met it in the first one, if the common difference on the first check was 3, if you remember, we were taught to just make that 3n, and then we of course would figure out whatever the other part was. But again, on the first type, if it matched on the first one, we made it 3n, and then we just kind of went from there. But again, it was n to the first power, or just a regular n. We learned that if it took 2 attempts to make the common difference, that it was an x squared pattern. So we don't know for sure what the pattern is, but we would say x squared, and then we would of course do some work, which we'll talk about in the next couple weeks, on how to figure that out again. And then if it took 3 attempts, that we knew that this was a x to the third. Again, this was a first attempt check, this is a first second check, and the third one was a first second third type check. And so when you see your work on the MathXL today, all it's going to ask you to do is tell whether it's a basic x, or I should put an x there, a basic x, a x squared, or x to the third, and so you'll analyze the pattern and you'll make your choice based off of all that. So again, what you're going to see on your MathXL is just going to say identify the type of pattern, determine whether it is a x, x squared, or x to the third pattern. And so you go 0, 1, 2, 3, which is in order. We check 1 to 2, which is plus 1. We check 2 to 5, which is plus 3. We check 5 to 10, which is plus 5. Of course, that doesn't match, so we check again. This is plus 2. This is plus 2. Since it is a first, second level check, you would identify this as an x squared pattern. And so if you were looking at a multiple choice question and the x did not have a second power on it, then we would know that that's definitely not the answer. the other one. So we're looking at 1, 1, 2, 4, and so on. Again, the x's are moving in order. Our y's are adding 3 here, adding 3 here, adding 3 there, which of course just makes it a regular X pattern. Again, we will talk about exactly how to do that again, but for the Math Excel you're doing today, it'll just pretty much give you the option to just choose the X as its pattern. And then when looking at the third question on that, from 5 to 6 is +1, from 6 to 13 is +7, from 13 to 32, again, I don't know what it is, but I can do 32 minus 13 in my calculator to get 19. And then 32 to 69 is 7. I think 37 is what it's going up by. And again, that's not a match, so we look at our second level, which is +6. This is +12. And again, if you don't know what 37 minus 19 is, just to check, I think we saw it earlier, which is +18. Which means our second check didn't work. Now we look at our third, that's +6, +6, which means that this would be a x to the third pattern because it took 1, 2, 3 checks to get down to what we're looking for. So again, this Math Excel is not meant to really do anything but just kind of force you to think about some things. It's to give you an assignment that lets me see what you know or do not know. It is not a true quiz. It is just something that tells me who understands, who doesn't understand, and so I can try to possibly make some assignments that will get us where we need to be for this final. Writing the equation line, the last big topic that we would discuss today is going to involve using algebra to determine what the equation of line was. If you remember, it required us to use the slope-intercept formula to find the value of b, and afterwards we simply plugged it into the final answer. There were 3 levels again to this type of problem, but we're only going to focus on the easiest 2 types. We'll look at the more difficult type when we actually get to that spot in the review, but again, this is something that you want to try to bring back to your memory so that we can be ready whenever that's time to review. Otherwise, we'll have to start from scratch, which is tough to do. So one type of question gave us a slope and a y-intercept. It was extremely easy, and it only required for us to plug in the values for m, which was slope, and b, which was y-intercept, keeping in mind that the equation that we used was y equals mx plus b, which we have used plenty of times to graph when we say that this number tells us to go up 2 over 1, or that number tells us to go up 5. Again, this was our slope, and this was our y-intercept. And with that said, it's asking you to write the equation of line, for example, with a slope of 4 and a y-intercept of 2.5. Again, if you're using y equals mx plus b, you simply put 4 in for your slope, and you put 2.5 in for your y-intercept, and that's how easy it was. You just put those 2 numbers in, and it was over. So it made it a very easy question, but you have to just make sure you know what goes where. The next one talked about writing the equation of line with a slope of 4.6 and a y-intercept of -7.2. So again, using the y equals mx plus b, you want to make sure you plug in your slope for m, which is 4.6x. A -7.2 means put -7.2. And again, that would be the way that you deal with that question. Alright. Again, the tougher of these 2 today, which really isn't that tough because you know the algebra now, a lot of you know how to solve. It just gave us a point in the slope, and it required us to plug in key values to the slope-intercept formula, which was y equals mx plus b, and then identify the value of b. So we're going to look at a couple of these things, then we're going to do a couple of combination problems, and then we'll leave it behind. But what we had to do when it said write the equation of a line passing through the point with the slope, we were taught to put y equals mx plus b first. And for those who couldn't remember, I taught you to, or we talked about labeling our x and y so we know exactly what was what, and then we plugged in what we knew. We came to this equation and we figured out that y was 6, so we put a 6 in for y. That m, which represents slope, is -3. That x is over here, which is 4, and then we put plus b. I hope this is coming back to your memory because again, it's really not that tough to do. And then we ended up with 6 equals -12 plus b. And then we solve for b by adding 12 to both sides, which gave us 18 equals b. And once we found b, remember now we put the b in with the m, and our final answer was y equals -3x plus 18. Keeping in mind that you could check that answer by plugging in x here and seeing if you get 6. So negative 3 times 6, times 4. Can't see it. Negative 3 times 4 plus 18 gives us the answer of 6, which is what we're supposed to end up with. That's how you know you had it right. Alright. This is the last sheet we're going to talk about, and again, just kind of look at one more of these and then look at the combinations that we did from yesterday. So the last one from this topic asks us to write the equation of a line that passes through the point negative 4, 3 with a slope of 2. And so again, what we were taught to do was put y equals mx plus b, label our x and y to make it easier, knowing that y now is 3 equals m, which is 2, times x, which is negative 4, plus b. And then we were taught to just solve. So 3 equals negative 8 plus b. You add 8 to both sides, you get 11 for b. Everything is there, and now you go ahead and put your final answer of y equals slope is 2x plus 11. And to check that out, again, you simply took your calculator, plug negative 4 in for x, so 2 times negative 4, and then plus 11, which gave us the answer of 3, which is what we want to have right there. The very last thing we're going to talk about here is about the combinations work that we did. Again, it was talked about yesterday, and it is going to be on the quiz, and it is also going to be on the final, so you want to make sure you're aware of all that. But again, the key idea here is that you start with, we're looking for numbers that multiply to equal 120 and add to be negative 23. Again, they multiply to be 120, they add to be negative 23, and so we made a tree for 120. The way we made the tree was we started with 1, and we asked ourselves 1 times what makes 120? Of course, it's 1 times 120. And then we said 2 times what? So we did 120 divided by 2. We got the answer of 60, which meant that my second part was 2 and 60. Then we did 120 divided by 3, and we get the answer of 40. And then we did 120 divided by 4, and we got the answer of 30. Then we did 120 divided by 5, and there's a lot of numbers that go into 120. That's why I picked it 5 times 24. Then we did 120 divided by 6, which is 20. 120 divided by 7, which, because it gives me a decimal, means 7 doesn't go. Then we try 8, which is 15, so 8 and 15. 120 divided by 9 I don't think goes. Notice we get a decimal, and 120 divided by 10, which is 12, which tells me we're getting close because these two numbers are getting closer to each other. I don't think 11 goes into 120. It doesn't. And then once we get to 12, notice 12 is right there. So this is our box here that we're looking at. Now we're looking for the ones that make negative 23. Well, if you add 1 and 120, nope, that's 121. That's 62. That's 43. That's 34. I think that's 29. This is 26. 8 and 15, though, let's just check real fast. Notice it gives me 23. But remember what I told you yesterday is that on this Math Excel assignment, your signs are going to be the same. And so it's going to be a negative 15 and a negative 8. As your numbers there, again on Math Excel, you'll simply type negative 8 comma negative 15 because it's going to ask you to separate your numbers with a comma, and that is all. And then the very last question I'm going to do before we get to the Math Excel, multiplies to be 98, adds to be 91. Again, starting with 1 is 1 times 98. 2, we check out what 98 divided by 2 is, and we get 49. I don't think 98 goes into 3, but let's see. It doesn't. 98 into 4. Nope. 98 into 5 I don't think works either. Into 6. 7. 7 and 14. 8. 9. 10 I don't think, because it should end in a 0. But notice that when I got my answer, or when I checked 10, I got an answer of 9.8, which, as I said, when this answer is smaller than what you're typing in, it means that's your whole tree there. Now, in terms of which ones had to make 21, that makes 99. Nope, that makes 51. Nope, but this one here is what makes my 21. So it's 7 and 14. Again, on that you would just type 7 and 14. I need to remind you again that this quiz, or this Math Excel assignment, is not really a quiz. It is just a way for me to see who gets it, who I can give some freedom to, and who needs to meet with me and go over some basic things before we start really reviewing and doing some assignments. So make sure that you take your time on this. Again, you are working alone. You are not really to ask any questions of anybody else. Just do your best on it. Stay out of trouble. And try it, because you can miss those questions as much as you want. You can use your notes. You can come back to the video. Just make sure you're doing what you need to do to try to get some of these right. There is some extra review on there, but like I said, just work out as much as you can. It'll give me an idea to see where you stand, and then from there we can start reviewing for this final. Again, keep in mind, in terms of your grade here, there's first quarter, there's second quarter, and there's final. For those of you who got, there's third quarter, there's fourth quarter, and there's final. If you got an F here, or you got an F here, or getting an F here, then you have to pass your final. And you have to keep in mind that if you have any F here, you have to get a 60% on the final. I do not give breaks on the final, not for the second half of the year. So make sure that you are ready to do this, especially if you run the risk of having to take this class over again. I'm not going to have sympathy if I am preparing you the way that I know I am and you decide not to do it. It is up to you to make sure you do what you are supposed to do. Now again, I am going to prepare you as well as I can, and I'm going to give you the best chance to do it, but you have to want to pass this final in order to actually start studying and preparing the way you're supposed to. So other than that, like I said, go ahead and go to your Math Excel, get started, and I will see you on Monday. Good luck.